It flew England to South Africa, but the first flight was St. John's, Newfoundland to Ireland. So the first crossing of the Atlantic was in 1919 with the Vimy, and not Lindbergh. As Will Rogers said, flying to Paris is okay, but what you're really going to be known for is the first man to fly a ham sandwich from New York to Paris. Because he took his lunch with him. A ham sandwich is among that lunch. So at any rate, so they had flown to Australia, and then they flew to South Africa, and then so the final flight was to Ireland, and Steve Fawcett got involved, and he there was a Canadian company that was building something called an Orinda engine, and the company was Orinda, so they called it that, which is actually an old company, and it started out being a Chevy V8, and then it went through $20 million and became an expensive Chevy V8. And at any rate, he got a couple of those, and off they went to England.
And that's what they used there.
Yeah, with that. So that's where the Vimy is now. Mark Rubels, who's a friend of ours, was one of the pilots and involved in the whole project. And so he goes to England because he's I can't remember what they call it on home builds. He's the certified mechanic or whatever. So he does the inspection. So he goes to England, does the inspection, flies it around, does any training they need, and then off he goes. So that's what he's been doing for the last couple of years. But let's see. So then I started looking at Orindas. Well, those engines were $250,000 per engine.
Well, they made them as like replacements for turboprops, right?
Yeah, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, they're going to put
because anybody with a turboprop would never put a piston engine. I mean, that's why you got a turboprop.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, it does everything you want to do.
Yeah.
Real long engine life and altitude and blah blah blah. At any rate, crazy idea. So some company in Texas bought it pennies on the dollar because they realized it's good for nothing. You got this, semi-car airplane engine, which was highly developed, but nowhere to go. Like a lot of things, you see this happen all the time in aviation. People dump incredible amounts of money in projects like all these light jets. You must have 50 light jets with about one market for, 50 airplanes. I guess it's kind of crazy. At any rate, the long and the short of it is I started talking to them, and I went to Oshkosh and talked to them and blah, 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 blah. And finally I said, well, how about an engine? I'm building the engine mount, let's go. Oh, well, okay, here's what we can do. We'll give you an engine for $200,000. I went, that's not what I had in mind. I said, Mark told me you have engines you've given to operators, ag business and everything, and they try it out, and then around it goes. And I said, why don't you give me one of those engines, and I'll use it, and I'll pay to rebuild it, I'll rent it, whatever you want, and that's what we'll do. And they well, we can't do that. I said, well, the funny thing is, I have a friend who said, all right, how much is the engine? You think that's a good engine? And I said, I think it's a pretty good engine. And he says, well, I'll buy the engine. So he's going to pay $250,000 for the engine. I said, I'm not going to take your money. I said, it's crazy. And besides, I think they're all lunatics, and they're not going to be in business. So by the time I'm flying it, I've got an engine they got to run home and make parts for, because they're not going to make parts. So then I started looking back at the Liberty and talking to people, and I thought, if we can get a couple of them, and if we can take care of the problems, I mean, it's just a big John Deere tractor engine, or as my friend says, it's 6 Harleys. What's your problem? So that's what we did. So this is the last one I got, which is a complete engine. The other couple were, I won't name from who, but they were taken apart. All the good parts were taken out, or so they thought. They just didn't know enough about them. So I actually got some decent parts.
But how many engines did they go through on the world? that?
You know, I think about 17, but the problem with that number is it doesn't really reflect the engine. What I mean is, when they got to Japan, they changed the engines automatically because that's what they were intended to do.
Right.
When they get to Calcutta, they were going to replace them. When they got to England, Turkey, wherever, they ought just to replace them. So the engine was about 350-hour engine in about that time. So,
But they had like a failure over the Atlantic, obviously.
they had
Southeast
one
Asia.
one in Alaska, and they had one in the Atlantic. So those were the two failures. Oh, they did have problems going into Karachi, Pakistan.
And didn't they sit down somewhere in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, or? did
Oh,
have an
they
engine
had, well,
failure?
they had cooling problems, which
Oh.
led to
okay.
engine problems. So, yeah, well, actually, it was a pretty decent engine in its day. It has the cams have roller followers. You know, I mean, I can remember when the hot rodders got roller, cam followers, and they were all, whoa, this is hot stuff. Yeah, well, this is 1918, designed in 1917, so so it's a good engine. It's a good engine. Let's look at it.
I mean,
Any